Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the CAF News. My name is Kevin Donovan, and with me, Brice Ominski. Brice, how you doing?
Doing good today, Kevin. Some really interesting stories as we go forward. There's three things that we want to delve into. The first is some recent advancements with ARM processing in the cloud. Second, let's talk a little bit about space supply chains. And third, what's happening to our systems with security. So let's start with the ARM. So we have two big stories there. AWS has launched its Graviton 4 base series. And we also have the Google Cloud with its C4A virtual machines. And both these cases, we're looking at really significant improvements in, I guess, performance to power. Like if you were looking at, CPU output to watts, it's a huge increase. And is this a trend, do you think, Kevin? This is a huge advance in the hyperscaler world. Going towards performance. Do you see this continuing?
Yeah, this kind of surprised me. I hadn't seen or foreseen necessarily any kind of a leap forward in processing and more efficient processing. The Amazon announcement was benchmarking at like 40% better compute performance. 50% higher memory throughput, and all at lower electricity usage. Same thing, similar lower numbers, but similar things with Google. These 40% better compute performance with, 20% lower power draw really surprises me that this just kind of
it's a huge increase, and
yeah.
To me, it's in a real sharp contrast. If we start looking at what's happening in the industry, we look at some of the things that are happening, say with NVIDIA. By contrast, they have their Blackwell out. It's an energy hog. It's like you're firing up the engine, you're just sending CO2 into the air. And on the other side, you have these ARM processors, which are very, very sustainability conscious, right? So it almost points to two camps in the adoption of these technologies, which is surprising because it's almost like there's a shift. Like I see one camp that's moving away from sustainability and the need to go towards things like net zero, and another camp which is give me the compute power, let me solve problems. And I'm really, when we put that out, what does that really mean to as architects? To me, it says you can't ignore sustainability, but you do need to be cognizant, I think, of where it's going to apply and where it isn't, right?
Yeah, well, and I think some of it, is starting to mean that you don't have to ignore sustainability. This reminds me of, I don't know when it was, 8, 10 years ago, when like socially aware investing became a thing. You could choose a fund that didn't care and invested in guns and bombs or you can invest in an ETF that was socially aware and, had so some criteria on the kinds of investments that were underlying the ETF. And it's similar here. I guess people, you'll be able to say, yeah, we're going to run, if you're multi-cloud, if you have that maturity, we are going to run this on Google because the C4A Axiom chips, give us the choice for, both performance critical microservices where energy efficiency is a priority. And that I think that's really interesting and a great thing. It should be, should be more known. We should be running this by Lisa for the sustainability group.
Well, absolutely. It's an opportunity to get involved with their workshop. And I think there's two components to this too. There's certainly a sustainability factor, but but also there's a definite cost reduction factor for getting environmental consequences. When you get more performance per watt, it's cheaper.
Yeah, it should also be cheaper. Yeah, you're right.
But absolutely, we should. I think there's some working groups that Lisa's working on right now in the sustainability area, and it'd be really interesting to run this idea by them. I think I'm going to attend one of those in the near future, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. Greener VMs now available.
Well, and for those that maybe, don't really pay as much attention to our planet, and, they're looking towards things like Mars, that brings us to our next story. So we have these, I think what's happened now is the deployment of 10 mock Starlink satellites. And in order to test the Starship payload orbital delivery system, big news. We're talking about, the mega constellation architectures that could accelerate setting up basically a supply chain for Mars-bound cargo, which is kind of huge news. Like, we're really moving in that direction. And I think we're going to see huge advances in architecture driven by some of these ideas. What are your thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Is it the next logical step? I don't know, I guess, in space payload deployment. It of course makes a lot of sense for Elon, to have Starship be deploying Starlink satellites. And success here would be key for, large scale launches and could be interplanetary, cargo runs. And so, it'll go from a test vehicle to being a real workhorse, the rocket as delivery drone, so that your space logistics fall into place. I don't even know what the ramifications are.
Well, as you're saying that, I have to say, with all respect to Elon, because I think some of the stuff he's done is really good, and I know it's politically charged. Putting that aside, it does seem a little bit like I'm in a James Bond movie right now. Maybe Moonraker we're getting ready to go to Mars, and we have these billionaires that are funding these races now. It's kind of a surreal setup that we're being driven into the future, whether we like it or not, to do these things. I mean, we talked in one of our episodes about a data center on the moon. Now we're talking about supply chains, and we're really setting up to mobilize the space exploration. And that's going to open up a couple of opportunities. One is with material science and in lower gravity environments, initiatives that we may not be able to do things on Earth, of course. And the other opportunity is going to be mineral wealth in space, that we may actually be limited on Earth for rare minerals. It's going to be really interesting to see where we go with all this.
So exploration and exploitation.
And talking about exploitation, that brings us to cybersecurity right now. Huge increase. I think there's a 9% increase or something in ransomware. And, we're finding that with this kind of gap in the cybersecurity world, people are being exploited. We're finding that elderly, for instance, are being scammed more. There's a real gap, apparently, in our ability to secure environments as architects and where they're at. And really twofold, modern security practices seem to be lacking, a need for zero trust, a need for better cybersecurity architectures, alongside aging architectures and the need for modernization. And moving into this future, how do we promote that? Is this, I'm going to say this is something that's inevitable, Kevin, moving towards a better trust stance in our architectures. And you've called out this need in some of your articles even. I think this is a big trend going forward. We're going to see more of. What are your thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, I had a couple different thoughts when I saw this. I mean, the initial report that I saw was that the FBI complaints to the FBI had risen, 9-10% or something.
Okay.
So that's people who are raising their hand and saying, I've had a problem. They could certainly be increasing, and or people's willingness to say, okay, we got hit. I think very often, especially in the past, especially in, for example, banking, let's keep it quiet.
You're saying the banks may not have reported this, and so now we're getting to a point where it's more socially acceptable to say yes.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, if it's becoming more just kind of like, less taboo to say, we had a breach.
Okay.
But there's also been an increase in losses, and that was even more dramatic. I think it was like a 30% increase in losses from 2023 to 2024 in dollar amounts. So, extortion tactics on the rise for sure. And yeah, that's of course something that, I mean, some of it is individuals, but some of it, quite a bit of the ransomware,
Yeah.
is organizations. And yeah, there's critical infrastructure pieces that need better defensive technologies. It's going to be a cat and mouse game. It's an arms race all the time, but architects certainly need to be focusing more on embedding resilience and rapid recovery as, first class citizen design tenets. These are important characteristics that need to be included in any plan.
Yeah, and that raises you raise a really good point when you brought up that, that number, that 30% increase in loss recording. And to me, there's a lot of variables that could be going into that. One, of course, could be, are they reporting it better, or did they keep it off the book somehow before? Probably not likely, right? They probably had to report it. Two, are we actually seeing a decrease in loss recovery? So in some cases, some companies would go after, losses, and they would get some of their money back. Is that happening less now? And of course, the most obvious is there's just an increase in hacking and these sorts of things, right? Which
Yeah.
I think as architects, we really need to be aware of the demand for trust in our architectures.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I would even go further to say that I think as we go into the future, we're going to see that trust and is going to become a really important brand differentiator in terms of business outcomes, so that the companies that are able to say we're secure, your information secure with us, are going to have a huge competitive edge over the ones that are like, your information isn't secure with us, it's out in the public, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and these attacks, are simply getting more and more sophisticated, and air gapping and immutable backups just aren't necessarily enough. As you
Yep.
mentioned previously, zero controls have to be built in the
Yes.
foundation.
I don't think that's an option going forward. A
Yeah.
lot's happening. Great discussion today, Kevin. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Well, hopefully, if you have any comments online, please put it in the comment section. Check us out. We'll talk to you soon. And as a reminder, join us with Lisa Pratico in the sustainability work group. I'm not
Absolutely.
sure when they are, but we'll maybe post that in the comments if there's any interest.
Sure. Yeah. And it gets published on LinkedIn also, as well as on the Mighty Network if you are a Chief Architect Forum member.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
Great.
Have a
Thank
great
you,
day.
Brice.
Cheers.
See ya.